Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Seattle Mariners. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins head out west against the mighty Seattle Mariners, leading the AL Western Division. But what do you know, Dan? The Twins take 2 of 3 and definitely should have taken 3 of 3 in this scenario.
You know, they actually headed north, David. You know, Arizona is south of Seattle, and then I meant to point this out last time when you said that they headed out west for the Diamondback series. They were already out west, so it was more of a southeast trip.
Okay, I will take criticism for my lack of geographical knowledge, but I will argue if the Twins are west of Minnesota, I don't deserve criticism for saying they went west.
All right, sure. They just are west. Anyway, couple things. I didn't actually get to go to this series, even though it was over in Seattle. We had some things going on here. It's a busy weekend in Spokane with Hoop Fest here in town.
A busy weekend here in Minnesota as well, Dan. Now, if your kids are in school, you're probably familiar with this phenomenon that are called birthday parties.
Oh, yeah.
Of which they're infinite, Dan. Mm-hmm. They never stop. I swear, that kid comes home from school, Dan, and there is nothing in her backpack but invitations to birthday parties. I don't understand it. How are there this many kids that she knows already? She has more friends
Have
now
you no joy in
than
your life? Is there no song in your
What
heart?
are you doing? Are you criticizing child's birthday parties?
No,
Is that what you're doing?
not. No, it just feels like a lot is all I'm saying. And so at these birthday parties, you know, you're talking to parents and you're just you're in a position where you're going to make small talk with people who you might not otherwise cross paths with.
Sure.
And so me, being the guy I am, I'm looking for Twins gear, right? That's what I want to do. I want to find that guy. I want to talk to him about Twins baseball. Well, about a year ago at one of these birthday parties, I had mentioned the podcast to a guy wearing a Twins hat. What do you know? And actually, I remember the conversation because I made like a really off-topic mention of Eddie Rosario, just sort of random, to see if somebody would take the bait, you know? And this guy came back with, I think it was a Guzman reference or something. Like, it was like, okay, he's my guy. I'm going to talk to him. But so this was Dan, and this is what I need in my life, another Dan. I just don't have enough, I don't have enough Dans as it is. But he comes up today at another birthday party, of course, and he says he's been listening to the show. And that's just so fun to find a listener out in the wild, kind of, who's just tangentially connected to me.
And it gave you plenty of things to talk about as the kids were, hitting piñatas? Were they playing, water activities outside in June, things like that?
Yeah, it was a wading pool and a playground and the whole parachute thing and stuff. Lots of things to discuss.
Well, what you described is basically like all of my life out here with 4 children, David. So yes, birthday parties are a thing. A couple of things we should talk about. So the Twins actually now have 5,001 wins in franchise history, which is a little bit more games than Dick Bramer got to broadcast. You remember how they cut him off, short of some milestone?
Mike, that's something that I would say, man, that is harsh.
4,972 baseball games. That's how many Dick Bramer called. Brutal. Leaving a guy short
Oh,
like
man,
that.
that is rough. Thankfully, the Royals beat up on the Guardians, Dan, taking 3 of 4. So now the Twins are just 6 games back in the Central. The Royals trail the Twins by a game, and that's all we really need to talk about in the Central.
There's more teams. There are 2 other teams in the Central. You didn't copy and paste the standings fully into work because it's too much to drag it down a little bit. So the Tigers are 38 and 46. They are 15 games back of the Guardians, and the White Sox are 24 and 62. They are 30 games back from the Guardians, and it is now, I guess, July by the time people are listening to this. An exciting series to talk about. Let's get into it in the series recap.
Series recap.
I don't even know if I'm going to be able to talk about this one, Dan. I'm just upset on so many levels about this baseball game that the Twins lost 3-2 in extras.
It was indicative of how the series went, because the Mariners scored a lot of runs in this game that they had no business scoring. In fact, they didn't deserve any of these, really, in so many ways. That said, a pretty strong effort from Seattle pitchers. Logan Gilbert goes 6 innings, allows just the 2-run home run to Correa. He also, though, gets a ton of help from position players. France, Polanco, Rojas, all with some impressive plays. Rodriguez stole a couple hits. hits. So this could have been a game that the Twins won much more easily.
Yeah, I mean, the Twins have just 5 hits. They go 0 for 5 with runners in scoring position. But the Mariners, Dan, not willing to be outdone in their home stadium, go 0 for 10 with runners in scoring position. But they piece together the runs through, I would say, incompetence by Twins defending.
Yes, most certainly, and kind of in spite of themselves. In the bottom of the first, what a great pickoff play from Ober to get Julio Rodriguez over at first. This play has become, it's kind of the play of baseball right now, where you don't throw at the base, you throw like at where the diving back of the player would be. We've seen this at first base, at second base, and the Twins pulled it off very effectively here in the bottom of the first.
We talk so much about the increased attempts for stealing, obviously, since the increased base size and the lack of throwovers, but doesn't it seem like guys are stealing not necessarily on the third throwovers? Like, I thought that we'd see a ton of that. When they implemented this rule, I thought all the time guys would wait until the third disengagement with the mound to go, but it seems like if a guy has made up his mind to steal, it's just as soon as the moment presents itself, he's going.
I think that that's true. Top of the fourth, an impressive spear from Polanco on a scorcher hit by Carlos Santana, who had a hit robbed in the second, also kind of a tough one for him. And then we see the first controversial defensive play, I would say, for the Twins. The bottom of the fifth with a couple outs, Haniger walks, and then Josh Rojas doubles him into right. Kepler plays the ball in the corner, and then Castro's the cutoff man. We thought that Carlos Correa would go wherever it took to be able to be that guy to cut it off. And the throw beat Haniger by, 30 feet?
It was a lot. It was very confusing how this play wasn't made. Vasquez glitches. Like, it's like a video game, when it lags a little bit when you're playing online. He just misses the ball. He takes his eye off it, doesn't come anywhere near catching it. And then Haniger just walks over the plate. And it's so annoying because that should have been an out 99% of the time if Vasquez would have been paying any attention to where that cutoff throw was coming from.
Well, the top of the second, the Twins do take the lead then. Correa homers with Castro on base, so it's 2-1. And then Correa holds his wrist up. You have a lot of comments about, we've already talked about Correa's heel in the past. Maybe we need to talk about Carlos Correa's wrist as well.
I do not understand the way that Carlos Correa held his wrist after being hit in the Diamondback series. And I don't think that I'm the only one who had this critique. Because as Carlos Correa is rounding third base, he holds his hand and his wrist in the same way that he did after he got hit by pitch. So I think he's making fun of himself a little bit because he knows how ridiculous that looked on film. But what came to mind, Dan, as he did this, did you ever see the movie Dodgeball?
Mm-hmm.
Vince Vaughn and Ben
Dodge
Stiller.
a wrench, dodge a ball. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. What it reminded me of is, they're the Cobras. That's the Ben Stiller's, the evil guys, their team. And they do this whole walk-in thing where they're like,
sure.
And they make the little hand gesture, and that's what Correa was doing. So I think maybe this was just a ploy by Correa to really advertise for Ben Stiller's Dodgeball movie.
They got to get Pablo Lopez involved with it, though. I think he's the marketer of the team.
He'll probably make a vest to celebrate.
Exactly. Well, behind all this, Bailey Ober had another good outing. 6 innings, 2 hits, 3 walks, 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts, though against the Mariners, that everything's kind of inflated. But his ERA is 4.30 now. And then after that, Alcala pitches a clean bottom of the 7th, a great catch over the wall by Santana within that. But then bottom of the 8th comes in, and it's a lot of curiosity here in the bottom of the 8th.
Luke Raley is at second base, and the ball is hit to Miranda, and he's running in on the ball. And Raley has to go into the grass. He's not anywhere near the baseline. He's closer to the pitcher's mound than to the baseline. Santana can't dig the throw that Miranda throws, and so then Raley goes home to score. And the umps get together. Rocco comes out.
Please attempt to be a gentleman.
Is not nearly as upset as he should be. He should be screaming he's out of the baseline. But Mariners fans are going to say, oh no, he just had to get out of the way so Miranda could make the play. No, look at the replay. Look how far out of the way he goes. He clearly is doing it intentionally to not get tagged by Miranda. And I'm just very frustrated about this because not only does he change his direction, which you're not supposed to do, once you choose a line on the base paths, you got to stay on that line. He intentionally goes further than necessary to get out of the way of the tag. And he should have been called out, no question in my mind.
I'm going to push back just a little bit as a rule follower. So this is the rule. Rule 5.09B1. A runner's base path is established when the tag attempt occurs and is a straight line from the runner to the base he is attempting to reach safely. And then you've basically got 3 feet of wiggle room once that's been established. And the idea here is that there's no painted line between the bases, right? So they can kind of take whatever path, but it's the initial initiation of the tag that is important here. And while I don't like it, I think he's okay here in the sense that it wasn't until he initiated the tag that Rayleigh really started to kind of contort his body out of the way.
No, you could see the path he was taking initially. He had to break with his initial line to get out of the way of the tag. Even though Miranda hadn't fielded the ball yet, everybody can see this. There's some subjectivity here, Dan, that I think the umpires ought to be able to offer when making a call about this, because if you're telling me that if we're in a world of slow motion, but the Flash is on second base, as long as he breaks his line far ahead of when the ball reaches that third baseman, it's okay. He could run to the left field wall and then tag that and then come to third base. No, Dan, no. The umpires need to be bright enough to understand what's happening. He's not doing that because that's his preferred line. He's doing that to be out of the way of the tag that's coming very shortly.
Well, Rule 5.09b9 goes on here. And so it talks about how, like, as long as a base runner doesn't do something that's like makes a travesty of the game, and that is the word they use, is travesty of the game. Like, I think the Flash going to the left field wall and then back to third, that would be a travesty of the game. This was not a travesty.
This makes my argument that it's subjective on the part of the umpires, and I would say going as far out of the baseline as Rayleigh did in order to avoid the tag, that even though Miranda hadn't started the action of putting the tag into play, he should have been called out.
I mean,
it is a travesty. It's a travesty that he didn't get called out, Dan, is the problem here.
Right. Well, I agree with you there. In any case, Jax does get out of the 8th inning, and then Duran gets out of the 9th as well, but the Twins don't score in the 9th or the 10th. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. But in the bottom of the 10th, Julio Rodriguez grounds out, which is fine, moves the ghost runner Crawford to third, and then Cal Raleigh, who is actually college roommates with Cole Sands at Florida State, this is pointed out on the broadcast, grounds back to Sands, the pitcher, but Sands is a righty, and he has to move to his left, and the ball kind of gets past him, and by the time Sands has it, he fires home. I don't think he was going to get Crawford. I think he was probably going to be safe, even with a good throw here, but a frustrating way to end this game.
No fault should be at the feet of Cole Sands. He knows the only play he has is at home. He's going to try his best. It's nearly an impossible play to make. All the thing the guy has to do is make contact on the ground, and he's almost guaranteed to score the run from third.
To be honest, Christian Vasquez is one trying to catch this ball. There's no way Cole Sands is making it out there at home plate.
Not a chance. With that, then, let's go on to game 2. A much brighter side of this series. Twins win this one 5-1. Big game for Buxton, who doubles in a run and hits the big 3-run homer that gave the Twins the victory.
Yeah, a much more straightforward win here, and really a straightforward game. Pablo Lopez goes 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 walk, 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts. The Twins struck out the Mariners 15 times in this game. Top of the second, the Twins score first. Kepler doubles to right field, and then Miranda on his 26th birthday singles to center, so it's 1-0. Bottom of the third, Haniger homers to left to tie the game 1-1, but then it's the Buxton show.
Top of the fourth, then Santana leads off with a double. 3 batters later, Buxton doubles him in. It's 2-1 Twins, thank goodness. And then, as we mentioned, top of the 6th, the big hit comes with 2 outs from Buxton, who homers his 8th of the season to score both Correa and Miranda.
Yeah, curious play in the bottom of the 8th. Cal Raleigh again. He's out at second trying to stretch a single into a double. I think he's safe, though, and I don't understand why the Mariners aren't challenging. If they challenge this play, and I think that they would have been, because of Raleigh's slide, I think he was safe. They got second and third still, and you're down 4, and anything could happen. I was just surprised they didn't challenge there.
It does seem at that point in the game, what are the odds that you're going to need it in the 9th? Like, you might as well give it a go.
Well, and in the 9th, I believe the rule says you can ask for a review, and they always seem to allow those. But in the bottom 9th, but then in the bottom of the 9th, Griffin Jax comes on, strikes out the side, and this was a good trend that we saw. No drama late in games 2 and 3 when the Twins bullpen and the big arms came in.
That's why I kept falling asleep in game 2, Dan, because nothing exciting was happening. The Twins were just shutting it down.
Well, game 3, another win for the Twins, 5-3, great baseball game, but weird things happened in this one too. We'll start though with the good. Joe Ryan goes 5 2/3, 6 hits, 1 earned run. He does allow 2 runs, 10 strikeouts. But again, inflated numbers against the Mariners. Struggled early with traffic, just on the base paths. A couple of runners on in the bottom of the first and the bottom of the second. But then he settles down, and he also very handily, for the Twins' fate, I suppose, hit Mitch Garver with a pitch in kind of like the chest or something like that. Yeah, obviously we're not rooting for guys to get hurt, but that was actually a really significant play, kind of as the game went on, because then Cal Raleigh had to move over and catch. And so the Mariners went without their DH, and this was like a National League team the rest of the game.
So yes, it's a true National League team at that point. So Luis Castillo is going to take in at bat, and he comes up and there's a runner on, Dan.
It's second,
and everybody's
with nobody out.
You're thinking, okay, he's going to lay down a bunt, but the Mariners don't want him to get injured, so they don't even have him swing the bat in. They didn't even have him just hold the bat out and hope that Joe Ryan accidentally hits it. And he just stands there and takes 3 fastballs at 91, 92, and 93 miles an hour, middle, which I'm shocked. Joe Ryan didn't give up a home run in this outing, Dan, and I think the Twins lucked into this because that was the at-bat that Joe Ryan was scheduled to give up a home run.
This is just so baffling to me. He played in the National League, and Dan Gladden on the radio cast was just livid on behalf of, I don't know, Mariners fans or something like this, for Luis Castillo not even trying at all. He's got 20 sacrifice bunts in his career, and I know it's been a few years, but like, surely he can at least try to do that. That was just... And it was costly because the Mariners lost this game by 2 runs. And you think if he can move him to third, this was the only way the Mariners really were scoring runs, was playing this like weird small ball hope for the Twins to make mistakes. Baffling play by the Mariners there.
Is it really small ball if it's always unintentional? Like, how many hits did we see off the end of the bat or off the handle of the bat that stayed in the infield and everybody still made it to base safe? I don't understand that.
Well, and this is the team that leads the majors in strikeouts too. So it's like they can't categorize plays like this because for them it's the true outcomes, right? It's a home run or a strikeout.
To circle back here, top of the first, Castro gets a single. He steals second on a very close play, and then Larnach hits him home with an RBI single. And then top of the fifth, Kepler singles, Miranda with an RBI double, Vasquez with a sac bunt, Dan. And I don't have the sounder cut yet, folks. But what I would play here is when Inigo Montoya says to Physic, he says, "You did something right." That's what I want to say to Christian Vasquez, is you did something right. Congratulations. You got a bunt down. You helped the team.
So the Twins, they go into the bottom of the 5th, which is maybe the weirdest inning of baseball that we have seen the Twins be involved in. I don't know. You go ahead and try to describe it because I'm just relying on the radio here. I wasn't able to watch this game because it's blacked out here.
Okay, so there's a runner on third. Josh Rojas comes up to the bat. He puts down a squeeze bunt, but the runner stays at third. And so then you got runners on the corner. Rodriguez comes up. He makes contact, and he scores because Joe Ryan has the ball in his glove, and he goes to toss it to Christian Vasquez. And as we've mentioned, there's no guarantee that this is going to be an out, even if Christian Vasquez has an opportunity to catch the ball. But because of that bobble, Ryan couldn't get the throw to Vasquez in time, and so the run scores. And it's super annoying because this is another play where had Ryan fielded it cleanly, the runner would have been out by 10 feet.
It was, again, just kind of a weird play. And then from there, Buxton loses a ball in the sun, which loads the bases. So then Luke Raley comes up. Luke Raley was coming up in a lot of interesting places, it seemed, for this team. He grounds one to second, and Martin's playing over there, and it's kind of between first and second. And Martin fields it, but because Santana had gone for it as well, there's nobody covering first because Joe Ryan apparently forgot. And it's okay that Joe Ryan forgets this, but not Jorge Alcala. He's forgotten to cover. By the way, Joe Ryan gets away with a lot because the next inning, he's like trying to wave Rocco Baldelli off. Who does Joe Ryan think that he is here? He's
okay. A couple of things. I don't know what this is. Like, I know how some people just like don't like certain players. Dan likes Joe Ryan, but he dislikes everything that Joe Ryan does. Like, I don't know how to explain exactly what it is, but you get so upset when I'm defensive of Joe Ryan, and you're like, you just don't like Pablo. You just like Joe Ryan. Like, I don't understand what this fascination is with you and Joe Ryan getting away with things.
It was, but wasn't that a weird play? Like, the Joe faces no consequences here, seemingly, for not covering first base, and then he has the audacity to wave off his manager when he pulls him out.
Yeah, so it's bottom 6, 2 outs. Rocco pulls Ryan for Thielbar. We're going to talk more about this later, but Thielbar walks Crawford and Rojas and then gets all kinds of good luck as Julio Rodriguez hits a ball 95 miles an hour off the bat. But had Santana not fielded this ball, it would have hit him in the forehead. Like, I mean, the luck that Caleb Thielbar had in this situation.
My power.
Caleb Thielbar's power is who I'm underestimating?
Well, I was thinking, Carlos Santana, something was weird. That should be a hit, but 6 other Mariners plays should not have been a hit in this series, and they ended up being, or at least advancing runners and scoring runs. Weird things.
Okay, this is a spoiler alert here for the grading segment, but your well-played baseball score is astronomically high. I don't understand how it's anywhere near the number that you've placed here.
All right, anyway, bottom of the 7th, here's Luke Raley again. He singles. Robles grounds out to advance Raley. And then Jorge Polanco hits something toward Max Kepler, and it's like Max Kepler glitched as well and forgot that he wasn't playing at target field and just kind of stopped running. flying. And like, I'm pretty sure if he had just put his glove in the air, you know, like Small style from Sandlot, he could have just caught that baseball. It bounced off of like the base of the wall, like 6 feet behind him. I'm no mathematician. I'm no trigonometrian, but like, surely Max could have caught this baseball. It was weird because that ties the game at 3.
So I went back and watched this replay a couple of times because I thought the same thing. I thought that, man, it really seems like Kepler should have had a chance at this ball. But I think he wasn't going to catch it, and he knew he wasn't going to catch it early. And so he sort of slow played it to hope that the runners weren't going to move.
Clever girl.
It didn't work. And so he knew he was going to have to play it off the wall. And he played it off the wall as well as he could. But I'm not convinced that he would have made that play.
It doesn't end up mattering because at the top of the 8th, Jose Miranda singles. And then Trevor Larnach, we'll talk about this later, hits a 2-run go-ahead home run. So it's 5-3. And then there's no drama in the 8th and the 9th. No base runners. Funderburk pitches a clean 8th. Duran pitches a clean 9th, and in the end, the Mariners do what the Mariners do. They go 4 for 34 with runners in scoring position. They strike out 39 times. This is a first-place team. We're going to talk more about this later, but they're 49-37. They're only 3.5 up now against the Astros, and so there they are. The Twins actually have now a better record than the Mariners, and we go on.
We continue. Let's go into Puckett's Picks winner.
Touch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
That was the saddest outcome for me, I think, Dan. Hogs is going to come away with the victory here, scoring 9 with Buxton and getting the bonus point, unfortunately. I come in second with Miranda with 5. You're in third with Castro with 1. And then Royce Lewis, Dan, the non-slump believing Royce Lewis, scores -3 on the series.
Yeah, you still have the lead on the season, 14.5 points, but Hogs now has 10 points in second. I have 5, and the listeners have 3.5. I'm going to need a massive comeback here, but it looks like it's turning into a race between you and Hogs heading into the second half of the season.
Well, let's hope that I win that race, Dan, because Lord knows I'm not going to win one in real life. Let's keep going here on to Beast versus Bench.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun.
So I'm going to keep talking about Miranda. Even though he didn't win me Puckett's Picks, he went 4 for 12. He had a stolen base. An error counted against him that wasn't an error, which I'm very frustrated about. And then he did advance in game 1, bottom 10. He was the runner on second to start the inning, and he tagged up, Dan, on a ball hit to deep right field.
I am not throwing away my shot.
As opposed to where Royce Lewis did it, where the center fielder was standing behind him at second base and then threw him out at third base by, 10 to 14 feet.
I think that's a little unfair. We've been down that road. It was good that he tagged up. We're going to come back, though.
I don't know why you want to die on this hill, Dan. Nobody believes this. You keep saying it like it's true.
I'm going to go with, as my beast, Carlos Correa, who vowed to us and everybody else listening that he was going to play game 1. You and I doubted him, and he comes back. He gets a home run. He plays really well in games 1 and 2. Doesn't play in game 3. And he also, I think, just reminded everybody of the value of defense and the value of just sound baseball acumen and the things that he said that he was going to bring here when he signed.
I want to build a championship culture.
I hope that's what he's truly building. Now, I see for our bench, both of us took unique approaches, I think. Now, to start, Dan, when I was looking through the notes and I saw what you had written, I couldn't have been more confused. I'm glad you offered some clarifiers here. Why don't you tell the folks who you put on your bench?
You don't know the song Luck Be a Lady Tonight from Guys and Dolls?
Luck Be a Lady.
Yeah, that's
tonight.
the song.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
I don't know what that has to do with bench, Dan.
Well, I'm just saying, because I would put Lady Luck on the bench because of the tricks that she was playing on the Twins here. I thought they just had a lot of bad breaks. And you might call it bad baseball. And I get that there's a fine line. But your criticism of my grade is going to make more sense based on what I'm talking about now. Because I think they had weird things happen. Baseball's bouncing off of pitchers' gloves. Pitchers questioning whether they should throw the ball home or third or first base. I just think, like, the Mariners scored 4 runs on plays in the infield. This can't just be because the Twins weren't playing well. This is some baseball luck was conspiring against them.
They won 2 of 3, and I would argue they should have lost 2 of 3 if this Lady Luck, Dan, didn't bounce so significantly in the Twins' direction.
You think it bounced in their direction? I thought all of this went against them.
I'm going to need a definition of luck here, Dan, because that is not what's happened in this series in my perspective.
So Lady Luck in the show is the character that the main character, Sky Masterson, invites to, like, blow on his dice before he casts them for, whatever dice game you play. I don't remember that scene in great detail. But anyway, that basically Lady Luck was not doing the Twins any favors with the baseball.
I'm sorry, folks. I shouldn't have asked for clarification.
Ogres are like onions. Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
Dan
All
Thompson is one of the few people I know who will start an illustration from a movie he's seen once that he just happened to be flipping channels and caught like 6 minutes of. And he decided that would be
in
good.
Guys and Dolls, right? 10th grade high school. I was a character in Guys and Dolls. It was just a long time ago now.
Okay.
Anyway, all right, you go ahead with who's on your bench.
I still don't even understand what you were talking about. I'm going to sort of merge the two segments here, Dan. I'm putting Rocco on my bench for the first time maybe this season, but I am pretty annoyed with Rocco Baldelli at this point. So let's move forward here to Rocco's Rewind, and I'll get into it.
Rocco's Rewind.
I see that the cell can't hold all the criticisms that you have for Rocco here. It's bleeding well off to the right here.
First of all, Game 3, bottom 6, Dan. Would you rather have Caleb Thielbar fresh out of the bullpen or Joe Ryan at 99 pitches?
Joe Ryan, of course.
For one more batter to finish out the 6th inning, what are you doing? You bring in Caleb Thielbar, who immediately walks 2 batters and then brings Rodriguez to the plate. And again, this lady luck that you're so concerned about caused a ball to fly at nearly 100 miles an hour at Carlos Santana. I don't understand how Lady Luck was not on the Twin side in this instance.
But hold on,
Caleb Thielbar does not deserve to get out of that inning without letting those runs score, and those runs should not even be charged to Caleb Thielbar. Rocco Baldelli should have a line item in the box score for earned runs against Rocco.
But some of those pitches, those sweepers were really close to the zone that if the Mariners had just swung at them, then he would have been just fine.
No, Dan, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. Secondly, this leads back to my initial criticism, which is you should have let Ober go an extra inning because then you wouldn't have had to go to Cole Sands in the 10th inning, which was basically a white flag. Like, okay, yep, I guess you guys can win. And then Joe Ryan, again, one freaking batter. Let him finish the inning. I don't understand why you're so concerned about one batter. And I do think it might have been punishment for not covering first, as you mentioned, Dan. Rocco loves punishing guys for not covering first. Final criticism, and probably the one that I was actively upset at while watching this game, Dan. How do you not pinch for Christian Vasquez in Game 1, top 7 with a runner on? What are you doing, Rocco? That's your whole bit. It's your whole schema. It's the one thing everybody knows about you as a manager is any opportunity you could possibly take.
Hang on a minute.
To pinch hit for someone.
We could use a pinch.
You're going to take it. And you have Christian Vasquez, whose batting average, Dan, the Mendoza line is 200.
Yes.
Christian Vasquez hasn't seen 200 this season. That's the guy you want up in a big moment in this game. I do not understand why Rocco, the one time I want him to pinch for a guy, he refuses to do so.
Fans want an ejection. There he goes.
And that was Gardy's gripe.
All right, that was,
as a follow-up here, Rocco,
right,
this is how you get upset. This is how you get upset. When you see a runner running to tag the pitcher's mound before going to third base, this is how you get upset and yell at the umpires to make them make the right call.
Yeah, well, I would jump on more things here, but you've pretty much covered it all. The only other thing that I would say is in Game 1, not using Buxton or Jeffers in the many pinch hitting situations that they had. He said, I guess after Game 1, that the idea was he was trying to go for 2 runs and not just 1 in the 10th inning there, which puzzles me. Just a little bit, but anyway. But here's the thing.
With a straight face, he said that to the media.
Well, if I remember right, the tweet was from Doe Park saying that there was that strategy that it was. I didn't exactly find the exact wording of what Rocco said there, but that was the implication. So in any case, but Rocco was playing to win the next game, and sure enough, he did.
I hate it when you do that so much, Dan. Just because he wins the next game does not justify the terrible calls he made in the first game.
All right. Well, let's move on here. We have some good moments here to talk about in Games 2 and 3.
Minnesota moment.
We already dove in a bit here, but Game 2 top 6, that Buxton 3-run go-ahead homer was just so fun to watch. And remember, it was a couple seasons ago when Buxton was on an absolute tear. Like to the point where it's like Royce Lewis in the postseason tear. Like you don't want to be pitching to that guy.
Wow. He's the one.
And we labeled that episode, Why Would You Pitch to Byron Buxton? And honestly, the way that he's swinging right now, he's not falling for those sliders outside anymore. And if he doesn't swing at those outside sliders, Dan, he is a dangerous, dangerous hitter. I wouldn't pitch to him right now.
It helps too if you only have like a 3/4 swing. You know, everything he swings at right now, and he's hitting home runs on it, is like, I think I'm going to just tap this baseball and there it goes. Like it's not the violent swing of like a Matt Wallner. Right? It is a controlled, mature swing that Byron Buxton has developed here, and it's working.
I don't know how, like, referencing the swing of a current AAA player, like, it's a weird, it's not like a Barry Bonds or, like, you know, a reference to, like, a great player. You're like, a guy who's currently at AAA?
Well, but like it allows Matt Wallner to hit towering 450-foot home runs to the upper deck and right, but it also leads to a lot of strikeouts.
What's your moment?
Game 3, top of 7th. The Larnack's home run and I was listening to Atterbury call this game, and he basically called this. He said, this is a great time for a nice nice 2-run home run to right, and it wasn't quite right. It was kind of right center, and it just felt like this hit finally kind of shooed away kind of these pesky Seattle Mariners that, for all we know, the Twins are going to see again in the playoffs.
That would be surprising, but it wouldn't be a matchup that I would be afraid about, Dan.
All right, let's go on. Maurer's Musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Maurer's Musings.
You know, there's been some transitions this season from guys from the majors to AAA and from AAA to the majors, and it's sort of difficult to gauge when a guy has sort of set his feet in concrete in any one given location. Eddie Julien would have been a guy at the beginning of the season who I don't think either of us would have said, oh yeah, he'll probably find himself at AAA sometime this season. But Trevor Larnach is a guy who I don't think either of us pegged as like, he's definitely going to be an everyday starter. Do you think he's here to stay for the rest of the season?
I think it's hard to think that he isn't. The only thing is if he were to go into a slump, and I think he was kind of edging toward that, at least statistically. Now, I was hitting the ball hard over the last couple of weeks. It would have been hard to justify, keeping Wallner at AAA when Larnach was struggling, but it seems the way that he bounced back this one, I do think he's getting kind of close to that safe zone at this point. But if Wallner continues to hit well at AAA, he's always going to be a threat.
Well, I mean, we're modeling swings off of him right now, Dan.
Well,
we're like contrasting
it's a beautiful
him. So,
swing, right? And you actually kind of mentioned this too, but will we see Eddie Julien again this year? And if not, where is he right now in the pecking order at second base?
That becomes the question, because if they need to call somebody up, I think it's going to be Brooks Lee. Unless Eddie Julien really shows something different at AAA and shows that he's no longer struggling at the plate, I think that Brooks Lee is going to get his opportunity.
And we can hope that what happened to Trevor Larnach this year can happen to a guy like Eddie Julien next year and potentially, take the roster spot of a guy like Kyle Farmer.
Well, with that, Dan, let's go forward into this ridiculous segment that you're going to put us through.
Series grades.
I will start.
You're going to start.
I'm going to start because I think my grade is more accurate. So Advanced Retreat, by the metrics here, they won 2 out of 3 on the road against a above 500 team. So I gave them a 10 out of 10 there. Now, well played baseball. There were a few miscues in the field. Really, if anything, it was in the outfield. Guys losing baseballs, taking weird lines, not playing balls well off the wall. There was that whole Christian Vasquez thing, and you would seem like that would lower the score. But I think that's just... It's just enough to lower it to 8 out of 10. 18 out of 20 is an A-.
This makes so little sense to me.
Why?
I truly
Dan.
Right. Okay, so there were 2-3 recorded errors in this series, and then how many dumbs were there? Like 10?
Well, but
and
dumbs isn't part of well, anyway, go ahead.
It is part of well played. So dumbs, folks, if you haven't been longtime listeners, Hogs, our third chair, always says that things that don't show up on the box score that are mistakes made by players are dumbs. So they're not official errors, but they're dumbs. And this series was filled with dumbs, Dan. And I don't understand how you could possibly give them an 8 out of 10 in a series where they did not play good baseball.
It's Lady Luck. It's Lady Luck. In this series,
you can't use it both ways, Dan. That's not how it works.
I did. She didn't. I put Lady Luck on the bench because she wasn't kind to the Twins. She wasn't blowing on their dice, right? That's how they use it in the song. I mean, it wasn't happening.
In the grand scheme of things here, Dan, she was very much on their side because they won 2 games that they shouldn't have.
Okay, all right. I see where we disagree. We don't see Lady Luck in the same way.
No, Dan,
all right.
There are episodes, Dan, where I just don't even know where you come up with this stuff. It's shocking.
Let's move on here. We got a couple more fun things to talk about in Herbie's headline.
Well, I don't even get to grade the series.
I thought
You're just skipping by me.
Did you give your grade?
No, you cut me off before I got a chance. You said I'm going first.
Okay, go ahead. Give your grade.
Talk about Lady Luck. I'm giving him a C because this should have been a sweep, and it should have been a sweep with a higher run differential had the Twins played any semblance of good defense in the field. I don't understand. Your grade makes very little sense to me. The whole point of the grading segment is that the wins and losses factor in, but they're not the end-all be-all. So sure, you can look at it as 2 out of 3 and think, yeah, A- is a good grade. If you watch this series, Dan, a C is a much more accurate grade.
It's the cows.
All right, I think... See, I'm using that now to run away. I've always wanted a sounder that allows me to run to the next segment.
Okay, onwards and upwards here, Herbie's headline.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines. All rise for Dan's Judge Love.
Go ahead, Dan. Now's your time. Take your time. Lady Luck Aaron Judge, whoever you want to talk about in the next minute or so.
All right. So Aaron Judge is now at 31 home runs, which is halfway to his 62 from 2022, which is the AL record. He's having great conversations with teammates like Marcus Stroman. He's being a leader. This guy is what is good about baseball, and I wish him all the luck here as he tries to beat his record that he set a couple years ago.
The Stroman stuff was super interesting.
It was.
And like some people on Twitter were going after Judge like, no, that's how you have to be. It's like, no, and I hate doing this more than anything on the planet is standing up for Dan Thompson's love of Aaron Judge. But in that moment, when you're willing to say to a fellow player that, hey man, that wasn't good. It wasn't a move from integrity, and that's not how we play the game here. As much as I hate the New York Yankees, Dan, there's something to be said if you're willing to stand up for what you think is right and something that you feel hurts the game of baseball. You got to give them some credit.
Pretty soon we're going to have a little sounder for All Rise for David's Judge love, I think.
No, it's more like, how about David sits up for Judge's
to the edge of his seat.
Love.
Maybe.
Yeah, to the edge of my seat here. Not willing to stand up for this. Yeah.
One other question I wanted to pose to you is that, again, we're like at the midpoint of the season, and so there are 6 division leaders. I'm curious which of these you think is the most vulnerable. There's the Guardians, who are up by 6 on the Twins, the Orioles up by a half game on the Yankees, the Mariners up by 3.5 on the Astros, the Phillies in the NL up by 8 on the Braves, the Brewers up by 6.5 over the Cardinals, and the Dodgers up by 7.5 over the Padres. Which of those do you think is the most vulnerable, the least likely perhaps to win its division?
Well, I think the Mariners, certainly, because the Astros seem to figure it out, and it just bothers me that they're perennial contenders. The Yankees-Orioles race, I don't really know. I truly don't. It's fascinating. I absolutely love it that the AL East isn't just locked into positions before the beginning of the season. Like the Orioles doing what they've done is fantastic. The Philly stuff is super interesting because the Braves, obviously, they're a juggernaut. They have a great team, but with Acuna Jr. out, that hurts the Braves a lot. But now the Phillies are going to be without Harper, so it's like you're both out a superstar, but the Braves have to make up 8 games. I just don't know. So it's really hard for me to say that the NL Central I just don't care about because I don't think any of those teams are really going to factor into the postseason in a meaningful way. And I just don't see the Dodgers losing steam here against the Padres.
There should be some good races. A lot of NL teams close enough in the wild card to make it interesting. And we'll see if the Royals and the Twins, for that matter, can hang on to wild card spots and send 3 teams from the Central into the playoffs.
That's looking like a more and more likely scenario, Dan. And my brain truly doesn't know how to process that scenario.
It would be pretty great. Well, hey, let's move on here. The Tigers series. The Twins are coming home.
And we'll see you tomorrow night. Puckett's Picks.
So the listeners are going to take Buxton because, of course, they should take Buxton. And then it'll go to Dan.
I'm going to take, because he's there, Royce Lewis.
Yeah, maybe.
He's got to bust out of this slump at some point, and I'm just kind of hoping it's here against a team that you didn't even think to include in the AL Central standings here. So I think this is his chance.
I guess I'm not taking Royce Lewis until I see him actually hit the baseball.
So who does that mean you're taking?
I got to take Correa. And this is a struggle for me. I didn't know whether I wanted Correa or Miranda because I think they're both realistic options, but I got to go with the Cobra, Carlos Correa.
Well, and then that leaves Miranda for Hogs. That's who he's taken. And so we head into this Tigers series. With those picks, I should point out a couple programming notes. So I'm actually venturing off to the Midwest here. And so I will be, if all goes well, recording this Tigers series from Iowa. And then I get to attend the Houston series coming up with you and Hogs.
Well, we're looking forward to having you, Dan. Back where you belong.
Are you sure? After this podcast, I'm not so sure you're going to want me hanging out, talking about musicals, talking about Lady Luck here.
I don't even mind that you're talking about musicals. It's that your metaphors make no sense. And like your idea of luck in this scenario, I still don't think you know what you're talking about.
Sometimes I don't, David. All right. Well, how about you go ahead and send us out?
Will do. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Men for the Win and find our Men for the Win Facebook page and Instagram pages. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Link in the description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins.
That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kuvas and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.